Volume 1, Chapter 42. Conclusion. You are listening at Novel Full. Audio. Race, Goblin, Level, 62, Class, Duke, Horde Chief, Possessed Skills, Divine Protection, Goddess of the Underworld, Altesia, Attributes, Darkness, Death, Subordinate Beasts, High Kobold, LV1, Gastra, LV1, Cynthia, LV1, Abnormal Status, GRUAA. The chief's voice can be heard from afar. The very voice of the chief that they should have been supporting. Neither the long-armed GIGA nor the former chief of the village, GIGU, could look each other in the eye. Under each of them were 15 goblins. They led them to march against their enemies as they targeted the weak flanks of their foes, attacking them at the same time as the chiefs on the opposite side. But despite that, the damages they incurred were big. Although they were both noble goblins, the goblins they led were just mere goblins. Already 3 have died. And none of the goblins under them were uninjured. The king is in trouble, muttered GIGA as he spun his spear to his long arm, sweeping the clotted blood of the orcs away. We have to go, but, GIGU responded as he looked at the scene before them. What spread before their eyes were the hordes of orcs blocking their way. The king had broken through the hordes of orcs. They needed to support him. Being the former leader of the village, GIGU was learned in the ways of battling as hordes against hordes. He watched over everything. If they were to attack from here at the same time, then even just a little, it should be possible to separate the forces of the orcs from the king. As GIGU concluded that to be their role, he turned his gaze toward GIGA who was beside him. GIGA was skillfully fiddling with his spear through the use of his long arms that, true to its label as a deformation, reached the ground in its length. "Let's go to the king," said GIGA. Hearing that, GIGU couldn't help but sigh in the back of his head. GIGA was loyal, but his knowledge in leading hordes was lacking. That's the reason why he wishes to go to the king's side so. For that, we must break through here first, replied GIGU. After confirming GIGA's nod, GIGU ordered his subordinates. They gradually neared the orcs as they measured the distance. Fortunately, the orcs were also wary of them, and were not proactively attacking. When their hordes had neared the foes enough, they charged. Go! As GIGU released the full strength of his skill, he struck his long sword against an orc. But that attack that would have easily split a common goblin's head was easily received by the orc. Still, it was within the scope of his prediction. At his attack, the goblins around him all moved closely to the ground, almost to a crawl, and they approached the orc. They struck the orc's feet, then broke away. The orc's pained voice rose, and GIGU leaned in, and struck the orc's head once more. This time, he killed the orc. Suddenly, the wind blew past him from his side as a long spear pierced through the body of an orc. Looking at that spear's pommel, it was GIGA who had struck out that spear. Formidable, praised GIGU. The reason GIGU hadn't been receiving attacks from his surroundings, was mostly because of GIGA who was fighting by his side. With his long arms, GIGU's range was bigger than the others, allowing him to strike against the orcs freely with his. That's why GIGU used the goblins, and challenged the orcs to a melee. With GIGA, they could demonstrate the effectiveness of the 3-man cell to its limit. We'll continue toward the king like this. At GIGU's command, everyone nodded. Lord GIGA, said a goblin wielding a long spear as he followed behind GIGA, don't push yourself, GIGA told him. That goblin was one of the goblins born after the chief had taken control of the horde. And under the chief's orders, he is one of the goblins GIGA had taught the spear to. A recent recruit that had just reached adulthood. But although a fresh recruit, he had to partake in this war. Naturally, the goblins that GIGA had taught gathered around him. And like his own chief, he made them follow his back. Don't fall behind, ordered GIGU. At GIGU's voice, Giga lightly nodded. It's for the king, said Giga. Of course, replied Giga. Giga, with his spear. Giga, with his long sword, they each gripped their respective weapons. At last, we can finally begin. Skill, Stage 2 activated. Physical strength 30% up, agility 30% up. Also, skill, has also activated. In exchange of the mental corrosion due to the crazed warrior's soul, physical strength 30% up, agility 30% up, magic power 30% up. Gua. Bring it on. This much strength was added to the great sword I held over my head. Then with a step, I went beyond my limits, adding pressure to my internal wounds. As blood vomited out of my mouth, I attacked. Oh! For the first time, I had managed to return Gol's great sword. Continuing, I struck again. I don't have the time to bother with my internal injuries. Oh! Even though he was being pushed back, the Orc King's mouth happily twisted into a smile. Annoying, I thought. Oh. Like I could understand his feelings. Something like that is for people who are equals. Right now, all I need to think about is defeating the enemy before me. As my blade met with my foe's, I sent his great sword back. For the first time, I was able to injure him. My great sword had struck against the Orc King's chest, allowing red blood to flow out. I'm happy, said the Orc King. It was the first time the Orc King had jumped back. I am the maddened one, Berserker call. The strong king, Gol. As soon as the Orc King spoke those words, my instinct immediately warned, not good. Following my instinct, I immediately moved forward. Gol stared at me as I struck my blade against him. Acceleration, sword speed, that attack that could not be criticized in any way was stopped with Gol's one-handed grip on his great sword. Small king, I will no longer ask for your name. The Orc King's heavy, cracking voice, reminded me of the dead of hell. Just, fight. Fight with me. Goblin King. King. Suddenly, I felt as if I heard a voice yelling at me from afar. When I looked over during the downtime of our fight, I saw a horde of goblins drenched in blood, surrounded by the orcs. Then a storm blew before me. The ground was hollowed, the sky was torn, and the wind whirled. Fight with your fists, fight with your weapon, fight. Gurjo. It was truly a maddened giant. I was right to step aside. It seems the Orc King rampaging in the world of humans isn't a lie. The unfolding scenery before me was enough to prove that. Anyone who entered this storm would surely be crushed like ice under an ice crusher. But even then, what will a long battle bring me? Behind me are the goblins desperately defending against the orcs. I can't run. Gurua. I stopped the fear crawling up my back. Don't be afraid. I defeated the orc leader. I defeated the Grey Wolves. I've finally come this far. As I thought that, I gritted my teeth, keeping them from chattering out of fear. Then I held out my sword against that rampaging storm. Our blades met. Oh. Fight. The Orc King screamed as his body shook in joy. I took back my sword that was blown back, and I struck again. Our blades met. Having mustered every ounce of strength I could, I was able to send his sword back. At that, blood spilled out of my mouth, and shock waves exploded at the meeting of our blades. Then I took my unfeeling hands, and wielded my sword tight again. Gurua. But even then, I was at a disadvantage. The Orc King's been attacking with only one hand, and yet all I can do is barely stand up to him despite using both of my hands. At this rate, I won't last long. Isn't there something? Something. Even a moment's fine. Suddenly, at that moment, I heard a war cry bellow out from afar. Focusing my sight toward the opponent before me, I used my ears to surmise the source of that voice. That war cry gradually grew closer, and then. G-U-R-U-U-R-U-O-A. TCH. I'm perfectly controlling that has never failed to take my foes' lives. On top of that, I even have, and yet the Orc King is still stronger. As GOL let out his fighting spirit, an attack fell down from my head, possessing pressure like that of a falling giant hammer. I reflexively received that attack head-on with my great sword. At the exploding impact, my feet sunk into the ground, blood spilled, sapping my stamina, and a fatal opening was opened. King! There, I heard the cries of goblins. Is it no good after all? As I thought that, looking up toward the giant, something passed before me. A giant shadow. New, as GOL exclaimed out loud in surprise, the great sword that was right before my eyes was blown away by a spear deer. It's here. The plan I had given to GIGI to direct the herd of spear deer from the lake is finally here. Moreover, within my hazy vision was the Orc King being forcibly pushed around by the herd of spear deer. It's now. My body is like a cloud of dust, Excel. Ignoring my screaming body, I rocketed off, and I aimed for the small opening made by the spear deer. The pressure that had solidified into a wall mercilessly attacked me. Turn me into a blade, enchant. Even if it's unreasonable. Using the increased magic power, I casted both Excel and Enchant. I even activated. As I wielded my blade in a side stance, I confirmed the course to follow as I ignored my crumbling vision. Then I let it loose. My field of vision became blank white. Impudent, said the Orc King that I it, here. Chief. I heard Gigo's voice. Giga, don't rush. To the direction of the voice, Excel. Guoa. As I felt the impact's shock, the Orc King's scream entered my ears. Pursue him. I forced my body, ignoring the sounds of muscles being torn apart. And I moved the now unmoving sword. Now, there's no other time but now. I took the sword that had been stood, and I raised it up over my head. Guboua. Relying only on the sound of the foe's cries, I brought forth all of my strength. Starred, not yet. My life is like a cloud of dust, Excel. Almost there. Sticking close to the Orc King, I accelerated, and I cut through his body even deeper. AAA, not yet. Turn me into a blade, enchant. TCH. I tried to activate a skill, but pain suddenly ran through my right arm, causing the power in my body to decline. Have I used it all up? Immediately after that thought, my body was blown away. After activating all those skills, I've finally reached the limit of my ether. My body can no longer move, but even then, I have to fight. With only that thought, I forced my body to stand up. But then it occurred to me. My great sword was no longer in my hands, not good. If I were to get hit now, I won't be able to retaliate. Not good. Suddenly, at the bottom of that well of despair and panic, the vision that had been lost began to clear up. What greeted me next was the image of a giant orc, lying motionless with his feet pierced by a spear, and his body skewered by a great sword. It was the dead Orc King. Did I win? When I looked down my own body, I saw a deep wound extending from my shoulder to my stomach, bleeding incessantly. At its gushing, a pool of blood had gathered under me. What had been done could no longer be undone. King. Just when I thought I heard Gigo's cry, my consciousness fell into the abyss. Skill, acquired. When your life is in danger, you can avoid it by relying on your instinct. Evasion increased by 20%. Author's note. And so, the orc battle came to an end. But Due to fighting a bit recklessly, a certain someone is. Volume 1, Chapter 43. The Goddess. Again you are listening at novelfull.audio. Race, Goblin, Level, 62, Class, Duke, Horde Chief, Possessed Skills, Divine Protection, Goddess of the Underworld, Altesia, Attributes, Darkness, Death, Subordinate Beasts, High Kobold, LV1, Gastra, LV1, Cynthia, LV1, Abnormal Status. What spread before me was a familiar scenery I'd once seen before. How are you feeling, boy? There isn't anyone but that woman, Altesia, who would call me that. As of now, the worst, actually. I need to keep up an abusive tone when dealing with this one. You've gotten quite handsome, haven't you? Sarcasm. The goddess of the underworld who narrowed her eyes was being patient. And? Are things going well? What things? That conquest and domination of yours. You are making progress, right? Or so her smile seemed to say. On top of the goddess' seductive charm, she also released a contrasting innocent charm. In response, I activated, yeah, it's going well. As usual, the goddess had snakes serving her by her feet. She also wore the same pure white toga over her body. And even the demonic statues lined up in the surroundings were exactly as they were before. If this place really is the underworld, well. I have to say it's a lot easier to go in and out than I thought. The goddess who sat in her throne emanated a dignified and coercing aura befitting that of the ruler of the underworld. Was she satisfied with my answer? Or was she not? Her two golden eyes narrowed themselves into a slit like a snake's. While her white porcelain skin was as usual, beautiful beyond perfection as if a sculptor had, to his soul's exhaustion, carved her body. And she folded her hands together, resting her perfectly sculpted chin over it as she stared at me. Then I guess that means it wasn't a bad idea to go easy on you after all. Go easy. What are you talking about? As if satisfied with herself, the goddess of the underworld, Altesia's face twisted into a smile just like a little girl who's enjoying herself in her own deviltry. I'm talking about the divine protection. The interference has gotten weaker recently, right? So she was talking about the goddess of healing, Zenobia. So you say, yet your mood remains foul. I purposely provoked her. If she were to keep up this fa.ade of hers as a seductive goddess, I'll eventually fall prey to her charms. Talking will be easier on me when she's mad. You really are smart. You purposely choose to provoke me to weaken the effect of the charm you receive from the divine protection, but unfortunately, I have no intention of falling for that anymore. Seeing her smile like that, I can't help but think she finds this haggling amusing. But contrast to her, her happy demeanor's no different from binding me in chains. What are you scheming? Gradually, I began to breathe harder. But even then, I continued to resist against that as I kept my temper in check. Nothing in particular, as of now, she chuckled. Just that, it's been a while, so I kind of wanted to talk to you. Don't lie. Oh dear. How vexing. I was telling the truth too. She looked at me with the complacency of a mother looking down her child. No, I suppose this is more the strong looking down the weak instead. The high-pitched laughter of the goddess of the underworld, Altesia, resounded within the piths of my mind. Also, it seems you've taken good care of it. That thing I gave you. Asterisk thumped suddenly, the coiled black flame snake on my right arm pulsated in response to its master's voice. Even pitch black, Verid, seems to have taken a liking to you. Looks like I was right in lending him to you. Pitch black, Verid, is that the name of the snake coiled in my arm? Yep. A cute hell snake, Altea, I gave birth to. I suppose you could refer to him as your elder brother for the time being. Stop joking. I don't recall you giving birth to me. Ha ha ha. Well, it'd be great if you could recall that sort of stuff. While we were talking, it suddenly occurred to me. I'm not feeling the same pressure I felt when we met last time. Why? She couldn't possibly seriously just want to talk to me, could she? Come to think of it, I still haven't heard the reason why you fight. Is Zenobia's daughter, Reshia, the reason why you picked up your sword? Now what? Don't make me laugh. Didn't I tell you? There is only one reason I fight, and that's for conquest and domination. Then you wouldn't mind if you lost that girl, right? No tears, no sorrow, yes. Her gaze was sharp, piercing through me into my very core. Of course. Could it be? Did I not make it in time? Have the orc overrun everything already, and set it all on fire? Keeping up a front, I tried to act tough, but in the end, I couldn't fool myself of my own feelings. I am, after all, horrible at lying. Ahahaha, calm down, calm down. Zenobia's daughter, Reshia, as of now, is still safe. When those words entered my ears, I couldn't help but feel relieved. Annoyed, I grit my teeth. To think I would actually unconditionally believe the underworld goddesses, Altesia's, words on my own. The more I want to believe her, the more she'll lead me astray. That fact tugged at my heartstrings, pulling both shock and anger. It's up to you whether to believe it or not. But, danger is approaching, declared the goddess with an expressionless face. The goddess of destiny, Luriyuna, has already found someone to her liking. Do you know what this means? Luriyuna, the third daughter who manipulates destiny, and guides heroes to fight against the forces of the underworld. You mean to say a hero has been born? The goddess smiled. Quick as ever I see. That's right, it's your natural enemy. If I, who is a monster, will try to subjugate the world, then there will definitely be an existence who will stand before me. If he who leads the monsters to conquer the world is called the Demon King, then the one who stands before that existence is the hero. If I am to become the High King of the world, then the hero who possesses overwhelming power shall undoubtedly appear to stand in my way. As of now that hero's but an innocent child that knows nothing. But it's only a matter of time before he gains power, and becomes a hero. A voice that declared the absolute truth. And the one who shall stand beside the hero is no other than the saint. Forcibly, she slipped into the gaps in my thoughts, and she forcefully dragged out my innermost concern with the uttering of that one word. And that saint is Reshia? I asked. You will lose her, you know, she confirmed. I couldn't say anything back. Or rather you could say my mind had gone completely blank as words of denial continuously surfaced within my heart. Shall I lend you my strength? Altesia proposed. What? The goddess smiled with the smile of a loving mother. Gently embracing everything, that motherly love of hers filled my chest. I've also been troubled much by those so-called heroes in the past. Besides, seeing a cute boy beaten black and blue is, right. Spontaneously, I ended up wanting to nod. I want power more than anything else. The fight with the Orc King made it clear to me just how weak the goblins are. But, the sliver of will left within me activated. What will you do? Do you want to try clinging on to me? I would, if I weren't a king, that is. I refuse. The fog in my head cleared up. Oh my, that's rather unexpected. Why refuse? I will fight on my own volition, I said. I will be the one to choose where my men die. I will be the one to send them to war. And it shall be for my sake that they will shed blood. And in so doing, should the day of defeat come, it shall be mine, all mine. The goddess of the underworld, Altesia, quietly looked at me. As usual, I had no idea what she was thinking. I am fighting my own battle. To cling to you is to accept my own defeat. That's why I have no intention of clinging to a goddess. Obstinate, huh? The goddess wryly smiled, and I smiled a bold smile in return. You gambled on me, so just shut up and watch. I won't lose. When I mouthed those words, the goddess' face went blank. Then she burst out into a guffaw. Ahaha, bohaha. She held her tummy as she laughed out loud in front of me. She's laughing again, but as usual, I don't see what's so funny. Interesting, as expected, you're really interesting, smiled the goddess as she wiped the tears off her eyes. As she finally contained her laughter to some extent, she clapped her hands. At that, a gate appeared behind me. If you pass through that door, you'll be able to return to your own body. Happily, I turned my back to the laughing goddess. Hey, she said. At times like this, what do you guys say? My back remained facing toward her as I replied. The old you, the goddess of valor, the old you, what would she say? Just for a little, I heard her gulp. Show your courage, she said. Nodding, I passed through the gate. The voice I heard, although just a little, might have been shaking. Are you all right? When I opened my eyes, what first entered my ears was Gi Za's voice, who was unusually panicked. What's the matter? I asked. Where'd your usual composure go? When Gi Za saw me reply like that, grinning, he couldn't help but nod back, dumbfounded. Damn it, seriously. You're way too reckless, I say. I think my life just got shorter just now. Well, thanks to you, the casualties have been minimized though. I wanted to ask him whether he was always this sort of character or not, but I decided it was wiser not to. What happened to the orcs? I asked as I raised my body. They withdrew as soon as you defeated the Orc King. Although it's also because Gi successfully lured the spear deer. Last night, I ordered Gi to take 15 goblins under him to go look for herds of spear deer to lure and crash against the horde of orcs. He took a lot more time than expected, but that can't be helped. After all, the only way he had to control the course of the herds was through the goblins' overpowering howl. It should be the first time for Gi to use beasts too. But still he managed to accomplish his task well. The damages? I asked. The holes we've dug around the village are mostly no longer usable. The fences have also been pulled down. As for the damages to the troops, 20 goblins have been killed. But considering we managed to repulse that orc horde, it's actually quite small. As Gi Za factly reported the situation, I nodded. The damages we incurred were much, true. But in the end, the damage incurred wasn't fatal. I got it. I'll take care of the rest. Go rest. Also, speaking of Gi, I began to stand when Gi Za began to speak again. But then at that moment, I felt the sensation of something eating at my guts. Oi. It's nothing. The snake, pitch black, varied, coiled around my right arm, throbbed. What I heard was the deep voice of a man. Show your courage, was it? What nostalgic words, huh, little brother. The voice came and left, leaving only those words. As you have broken through level 100, your class will now change. Your class will change from Duke to Lord. Skill has risen to skill has changed into skill acquired. Skill has leveled up. Author's note. The goddess that has changed her approach from brute force to a more roundabout way. The protagonist that's aware, but can't do anything about it. And the red snake that grows in power with each evolution now, what will happen? Volume 1, Chapter 44. Mad God, you are listening at novelfull.audio. Race, Goblin, Level, 5, Class, Lord, Horde Chief, Possessed Skills, Divine Protection, Goddess of the Underworld, Altesia, Attributes, Darkness, Death, Subordinate Beasts, High Kobold, LV1, Gastra, LV1, Cynthia, LV1, Abnormal Status, Focusing my consciousness, I searched my own status. Skill, the strength of your followers will be raised. Charm toward those of the same tribe will also increase. Skill, when fighting with the leader of another horde, magic power 20% up, damage received 20% up, and in exchange, damage dealt 30% up. That has a good effect both for me and the horde. The charm part definitely means that it will now be easier for adherents to appear. Meaning, on top of my subordinate strength being raised, I'm also going to get more magic power. What more could I ask for? As for it can basically be summed up into a skill catered towards a short conclusive duel. It's a skill that kind of gives off a kill or be killed feeling. It is true though that if the respective leaders of two opposing hordes could finish their duel faster, less lives will be sacrificed. It applies even for human opponents. After I finished checking my own status, I went to see how my subordinates were doing. I feel bad for Reshia, but I'll need to have her work for a bit. As I thought that to myself, I walked. I stopped moving for a moment to view the village that had managed to pass the night. Horrible, I muttered. I have heard Gi Za's report, but I still can't help but be surprised seeing the damages with my own two eyes. But on the bright side, the threat from the west has been completely dispersed. With the threats from the west gone, the only thing left to threaten the survival of the goblins are the wild orcs and the spontaneous giant spiders. There won't be any more raids to the village, a fact worthy of celebration. Having a safe place to run to when things go south is really assuring. It makes it easier on the heart when going out to hunt. We paid a price for it, now I must make something out of it. As I forcibly made myself agree with that line of thought, I continued to check on the village's situation. King. What called me was a blue-skinned goblin. Lord Gigo has evolved. Kneeling before me, it was the former leader of the village, Gigu. In the previous battle, I had him take command as my right-hand man. And naturally, being the former leader of the village, he was able to do a good job. He is a noble class goblin, the highest class next to me. There are also others who have evolved into a rare class. Would you like to see them? He asked. They're what we received in exchange for 20 goblin lives. I have to go and see them. Report, I ordered. As you will, Gigu replied. Summarizing Gigu's report, the one who evolved into the noble class is the Samurai Gigo. While the number of goblins that have successfully evolved into a rare class is 6. I'll have to think of a name. What a pain. What are your instructions regarding the newly evolved goblins? Right. It'll probably be fine to go and see them together. Besides, I need to properly check up on them. I also have to think how I'm going to make use of them. Call Gigo, I ordered. And, he seemed to want to say something more. Is there still something? I asked. No, there's nothing. After sending off Gigu, I continued to go around the village. After a short wait when I got back to my house, Gigo came. I took a peek at Gigo's status. Race, Goblin, Level, 1, Class, Noble, Sub-Leader, Possessed Skills, Divine Protection, Sword God, Ra Baruza, Attributes, none. His swordsmanship skill is quite high. If it's this high while he's still a noble class, then won't he surpass me once he goes up another class? Will cause his growth to take some time, but in exchange, he'll get more bonuses once he evolves up. Will keep his opponent's critical rate in check. Enemy critical rate reduced by 30%. Moreover, when fighting at the front lines, physical strength 10% up, agility 10% up, and damage received 20% down. Will increase his charm toward fellow goblins by 20%. Is the same as Giga. And then, the one that I'm most interested in, his Divine Protection. It's my first time seeing a goblin other than me be blessed with a Divine Protection. His Divine Protection comes from the Sword God, Ra Baruza. Divine Protection, Sword God, Ra Baruza. Reinforces the growth of one's swordsmanship. If the receiver of this Divine Protection can reach swordsmanship A+, then usage of the skill will become possible. Using a weapon other than a sword will cause the receiver to lose the Divine Protection. After seeing G.I. Go's status, I began thinking of a way to make the most of it. G.I. Go also received the sub-leader title when he evolved into a noble class, but the impression G.I. Go gives off is different. G.I. Go is the type to lead the other goblins with skill, whereas G.I. Go is the type to lead others through his charms. G.I. Go's way is more refined, but there are many amongst the faction of G.I. Go who admire him. Regarding the skill, I can make the most out of it as long as I have G.I. Go fight in the front lines all the time. The skill will also keep his opponent's criticals in check, so losing to a weaker opponent would be unlikely. He'll also last longer against stronger opponents. Right. If I'm going to make the most of him, it's got be the front lines. G.I. Go, you did a wonderful job in our battle this time. As reward, I grant you this sword. I picked a sword out of the piles of loot we looted from the orcs, and then I handed it to G.I. Go. Please excuse this one, but, as he continued to kneel down with his head down, G.I. Go shook his head. I would prefer a curved sword rather than a straight one. Well, that slipped through. My bad. Right. The sword god, Are Bazura, is watching over you after all. Then in that case, I should give him the same type of weapon. He did receive the divine protection from polishing his technique with the curved sword to this extent. So, I guess it's not strange at all that he might not want to use a different weapon even if it is also a sword. Well, as for me, I would hate it if he lost his divine protection, after finally seeing another goblin receive one. Picking out a curved sword that's still in good condition from the heaps of loots, I bestowed it upon G.I. Go. I gratefully accept. As G.I. Go happily accepted the curved sword, the surviving, stubborn old goblin ordered for the next goblin to come in. This time it was a rare class. The next goblin has defeated 3 orcs despite being only a goblin. 3 orcs. Impossible. Excuse me. The goblin that entered was a rare class goblin that was a size bigger than G.I. Go and G.I. Go. Race, Goblin, Level, 1, Class, Rare, Possessed Skills, Divine Protection, Mad God, Zu Oru, Attributes, none if I recall correctly, this should be a goblin that was born after I became chief. But the face of this goblin is completely different from before the fight. The once peaceful face has gone, wounded by war, and replaced by this face that doesn't have a drop of charm to it. His gaze is twisted by hatred, shooting strongly against even me as if I'm considered an enemy. Focusing my consciousness, I delved into the goblin's skill further. Aim at the target's vital point. Due to receiving the divine protection of the mad god, Zu Oru, it will no longer be possible to use any skills. But in exchange, physical strength 40% up, agility 40% up, and damage received reduced by 40%. Status abnormalities will also be lifted. Isn't this divine protection too strong? Even without checking it with my own divine protection, I know that divine protections generally give some power in exchange for some side effects. In G.I. Go's case, he yearns for curved swords so much that he would even go against my will. In Reshia's case, her body will sometimes be taken over her goddess, and so on. I wonder if this goblin is having his mind influenced by the god who gave him his divine protection. As I felt sympathy for him due to the similarity of our circumstances, I asked him a few questions, and then just as I was about to give him a name. Chief, please, let me hunt. Please, together. Even without activating the red snake's eye, I know full well that the has already been activated. But as for whether he activated it, or it was activated, I don't know. Alright. If I leave this goblin like this, he'll be a danger to the horde. I'll have to save him. After all, I've finally gathered some good men. It'd be a shame to lose them right under my nose. We'll end here. The rest I'll deal with tomorrow. As I declared that to the old goblin, I went out to the forest with the goblin that has been consumed by the mad god. Author's note. G.I. Go's fate will be revealed next chapter. Volume 1, Chapter 45. Sacrifice. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Race, Goblin, Level, 5, Class, Lord, Horde Chief, Possessed Skills, Divine Protection, Goddess of the Underworld, Altesia, Attributes, Darkness, Death, Subordinate Beasts, High Kobold, LV1, Gastra, LV1, Cynthia, LV1, Abnormal Status, after having walked some distance from the village into the forest. He'll be fine. I confronted the goblin rare that's been enthralled by the mad god, Zuoru. Chief, the eyes before me swayed back and forth between various negative emotions. That jumble of emotions revolved around hostility. Mad god, I do not know why you have taken a liking to this goblin, but I won't let you do as you please. Goo. Guuvrvuuv. Drool slobbered out of the goblin's mouth as his eyes turned into two dots. The goblin's body recent wounds gushed open, causing blood to splatter and his body to convulse. Mad god. According to Reshia, the mad god is a god born during war. Originally, he was a compassionate god, but after having his friend fall in battle, the gravity of the sorrow he felt broke him, and he turned into a mad god. Chief, W.Y. The goblin's mind continued to be eroded by the mad god, but it seemed to want to say something to me. Lord Jijijai GAAA has S's. Giga has. But then the pressure finally proved too great for the goblin, and the goblin swung his fist. AAA. That fist driven only by emotion tore the air. But I couldn't just leave what is saying alone. What happened to Giga? I dodged the descending fist. Whediddu. The descending fist crushed even the ground, prying into it. With his fist still burrowed into the ground, the goblin flashed his sharp fangs as he tried to bite the back of my neck. What happened to Giga? A moment after blanking out, I suddenly remembered the voice that called out to me while I was fighting the Orc King. That voice was Giga's, wasn't it? The worst possibility flashed through the back of my mind. Then while I was blanked out, thinking to myself, the fist enthralled by the mad god landed itself into me. My brain, shaken, I was sent fling away. I know he's borrowing the power of the mad god, but who would have thought that he would be this strong? That power that could cross over two class differences made me wonder of its possible applications. But Gigi. I held back the goblin's fists. I can hear the sound of his teeth grinding. I suppose it's expected of a madman. What happened to Giga? Gradually, I pushed back the goblin's fists. AAA. As the goblin's fists were pushed back, the goblin swung his own head wildly in an attempt but it into me. I lightly clicked my tongue. I could only blame the shallowness of my own foresight. If this goblin were an actual enemy, he wouldn't pose a problem for me. But as I don't want to hurt him, the battle is quite troublesome. Strength and agility empowered by the mad god. A maddened goblin that only recklessly wishes to crush the enemy before him. To make things worse, I can't focus because of Giga. The goblin's fist filled my vision, not good. Because I couldn't concentrate, I left an opening. And the arms that were being held down by me hit me. That attack was far heavier than I'd expected it to be, and I ended up letting go. TCH AGA AAA. Putting this guy down comes first. The goblin was exactly like a maddened beast with his limbs on all fours as he stared at me. Sorry. Forgive me. I'm well aware that the goblin's gathering strength in his limbs, so I took advantage of that opening and activated Gurua. But it had no effect on the goblin that had activated. But I knew that. The mad dog of a goblin wouldn't remain quiet after hearing that overpowering howl, and just as expected, Giguaa. A howl that strained even his own soul bellowed as the goblin pounced toward me. With as little movements as possible, I dodged that at a CK by sidestepping to the side. Then I struck the back of the goblin's neck with full intention of breaking it. I had taken the 40% damage reduction form into account with this attack, but if I were to make even the slightest mistake, this attack would undoubtedly leave a fatal wound. This fearful attack, no, rather than to the goblin, this attack might be actually scarier to me. But fortunately, the attack I let loose successfully knocked the goblin's consciousness away. Carrying the goblin's body up, I ran back to the village. The worst possible situation flashed through the back of my mind. Giga, please be safe. After the war, I had left a building to Reshia to use for healing the wounded. I entered that building with the goblin in my arms. What I saw left me speechless. Giga, at those muttered words, Giga opened his eyes. His right arm was missing from his right shoulder. His left leg was also gone from his left knee, which was dressed in bandages stained in blue blood. Chief, are you well? Yes. I'm all right. I'm all right thanks to you. As I lay the goblin in my arms, I rushed up to Giga's side. The other goblins also opened their eyes, and they looked at me, but I couldn't say anything back to them. Then, that's good. Relieved at my words, Giga closed his eyes. Right. From now on too, continue to work for me. This isn't the place for you to die. Giga smiled, but only one side of his cheeks rose. Chief, how strict. Of course. The enemies that we will face from now on will only grow stronger and more numerous. If at that time you're not around, then who will protect me? I'm happy, Chief. To hear those words. Quietly, I nodded. Chief, please, what is it? Please congratulate these men as well. At the other end of his line of sight were the goblins who were looking toward us. Right, of course. Of course. With my shaking legs, I stood up, and I went to each of the goblins. Some had lost their legs. Some had lost their arms. Some had taken a hit to their head, making it a wonder how they were still alive. I walked to each and every one of those goblins. And then as I looked them in the eye, I patted them on their shoulder, and I thanked them for their service. Then I went to Giga again. Giga, live, I ordered him. You have to. But my body can no longer fight is what he seemed to say as he struck his own shoulder. I will think of a way. So, stand with me once more, and fight with me. Chief, as I said that, I left the building. Well. Was that leg hopeless? I inquired Reshia when I went out. She must have been trying to be considerate as she leaned her back to the wall while she looked up to the sky. Yeah. I can't compensate for the loss of a limb. I see. Having heard only that, I left. The fire that blazed within my chest could not be quelled. So I ran. I ran and ran. All the way from the village to the lake. As I neared it, I yelled. Giga. I want to spit out my soul. He can't fight. He can't fight anymore. The warrior who lives to fight can no longer fight. I want to scream. I want to howl, and spit out this anguish. Reshia can't restore limbs. Even if she uses her power it's impossible. Of course, I thought of it. And I was supposed to have been prepared for it too. But, somewhere sometime, I turned my face away. Intoxicated by the heat of battle, drunk in the fervor of defeating a worthy adversary, I failed to think of the result. If I had only thought of it for a little, then I would have understood what it meant to sacrifice. And its weight. I. The one who took his limbs away was me. I didn't understand it. I didn't understand it at all. The weight of 20 goblins' lives. I can't waste it. No, I can't waste their sacrifices. So I mustn't forget. I must never allow myself to forget this pain. I will not run. I will not run away from this pain. And I will definitely become the king. Are you? Facing toward the calm lake, I howled. Author's note. He might not have been the protagonist, but I didn't let him die yet. Sorry if I misled some people with my suggestive words. Volume 1, Chapter 46. Pursuit. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Race, Goblin, Level, 5, Class, Lord, Horde Chief, Possessed Skills, Divine Protection, Goddess of the Underworld, Altesia, Attributes, Darkness, Death, Subordinate Beasts, High Kobold, LV1, Gastra, LV1, Cynthia, LV1, Abnormal Status. Reflected on the surface of the mirror was a figure with gray skin, and golden eyes like those of a snake. The mane extending from the head to the back was black, and the body was slightly bigger than that of the Duke class. The figure was just barely small enough to pass for a big human. On the right arm was pitch black, varied. The area he was coiled around was now a little bigger than before. As for the figure's face, it hadn't changed much. It had the same banality as that of the reptiles. Then from the head could be seen 3 horns growing. 2 were wrenched, while the other reached for the sky. But what was most surprising was the tail that had now grown. When I tried touching my skin, I noticed that some body hair had grown. I could move my tail at will. As for how it feels, it's difficult to put to words. After all, it's something I didn't have as a human. If I were to give an illustration, it would be somewhat similar to having an extra leg by the tailbone. I continued to swing my tail, trying to understand the sensation. It seems I'm not able to swing my tail as fiercely as the kobolds can. Exactly where is my evolution headed, I wonder? With my feelings renewed, I went over to the lake, and took a good look at my own reflection. Unfortunately, I could only tilt my head when I saw my reflected face. If this is the hobby of that goddess, then I say, she has no taste. My face had few wrinkles on it, and was even smooth like that of a human's. But undoubtedly, it was still definitely a goblin. If you add the mane and the tail on top of that, then I'm no longer a goblin, but a beast. It's hard to come to terms with it. Still, Reshia and the other goblins didn't flinch when they saw this appearance. If so, then this is undoubtedly me. If anything, I'm more surprised about their reactions. Normally, when someone changes this much, you'd wonder who it is when you first see them. Well, I did grow some body hair, so I guess it's something to be happy about. I'm a bit closer to mammals now instead of the previous reptiles. Well then. Let's leave the discussion on this figure that I don't want to see. When I saw how fiendish my laughter was when reflected on the lake, for a moment, I thought my heart would stop. That I'm surprised the others can take this without batting an eyelid. When I got back to the village, I went back to the king's house to receive the report, and fully understand the current state of the horde. At the same time, I also took the opportunity to see the status of the goblin raiders. Normally, I wouldn't push myself, and just do it tomorrow. But unfortunately, there's not much time left. The next goblin is a druid. The goblin that entered looked exactly like a human. It was a druid. Race, Goblin, Level, 1, Class, Druid, Possessed Skills, Divine Protection, Water God, Iron, Attributes, Water. Come to think of it, this is the first time I'm seeing the status of a druid with the So the class isn't rare, but druid. So if they were to promote up a class, they'll stop being druids. I'll be looking forward to Giza's next evolution then. I might see a new kind of goblin. I name you Gizo. Thank you, Chief. I am most grateful. So he really can speak smoothly. It seems Giza isn't an exception. Giza might be a good successor to leave the village to. If I were to leave everything to him right at the start, disputes might happen. So I should instead gather some trusted ones first to leave everything to, and have him gather experience that way. After I sent the goblin off, the old goblin's voice came. Continuing. The next goblin is a student of the spear under Lord Gi Ga. Race, Goblin, Level, 1, Class, Rare, Possessed Skills, Divine Protection, None, Attributes, None compensates for one spear technique, raising it up a level. Allows one to move for a short moment after receiving enough damage to die. As expected from Gi Ga's faction, they are well versed in the way of the spear. If I were to fight his men with only the spear, I probably won't be able to win. I name you Gi Da. Thank you. You really can't expect goblin rares to be able to speak well. Not that it's inconvenient or anything. The goblin enthralled by the mad god was also promoted to the rare class. All these goblin rares being born from Gi Ga's faction is undoubtedly a testament to the fierceness of the battle they were thrown into. But at this rate, will his faction end up dissolving? No, in fact, I should probably have it dissolve as soon as possible. How about if I have him teach the newly born goblins and the injured ones? It might be worth trying out. The next goblin is from Lord Gi Gu's faction. Race, Goblin, Level, 1, Class, Rare, Possessed Skills, allows one to see the opponent's weakness. Makes it easier to perform coordinated attacks. A skill with similar effects to my Eyes of the Blue Snake, and a skill that makes coordination easier. As expected of Gi Gu's faction. I name you Gi Dji. Understood. Aside from those, there was also Gi Da who learned the Beast Warrior skill. And the wind-using druid that I named Gi Du. These goblins will be the ones to become the Horde's new strength, and will lead the goblins. If there are any problems, there's nothing else except of that goblin rare that was enthralled by the mad god. I want to do something about the issue, but right now, I have to prioritize giving orders to my other subordinates. The war didn't only leave damages to the buildings and to the people. There's also the countless corpses of orcs buried in the holes we dug around the village. As we won the battle, it's up to us to do something about that putrid smell emanating from those holes. I've never seen an undead, but it would be a problem if those corpses were to turn into one. It'll also be bad for our mental health. GGI and GIG have arrived. At the old goblin's words, I raised my head. Good work, I said. The two goblins kneeled before me. The ones who were called were the Beast Warrior, GIGI, and the Stealthy One, GIG. I want you two to follow the trail of the orcs, I declared as the two goblin rares raised their heads. Understood, they nodded. Go as soon as you're ready, I said. After I sent the two goblins off, I called for the former leader of the village, Gi Gu. Gi Gu, I'll leave the protection of the village to you. While I'm gone, do not allow the hunts to be delayed. And at the same time, you are to continue the village's repairs. By your will. Then quietly, I whispered right into Gi Gu's ear. Also, please take care of Gi Ga. Filled with sympathy, Gi bowed his head deeper than ever. By your will, he exclaimed. Good. Now, go. I commanded. He is a noble class, and at the same time, he even has the sub-leader title. So he should be able to do the job well. As I dismissed Gi Gu, I called over the druid, Gi Za, and the receiver of the blessing of the sword god, Ra Baruza, Gi Go. Tomorrow, both of you shall lead your own troops, and pursue the orcs, I said. Are you sane? Asked Gi Za as he paid careful attention to my response. To that, I nodded. The repairs of the villages are still far from completion, and we haven't grasped our own foothold, and yet you're saying we are to pursue the orcs, asked Gi Za. Yes. If we don't chase them now, the orcs will recover strength, and eventually come back. At that time, it'll be too late. So it's a gamble then. While the threat from the west is gone, we should pursue the orcs, and push on toward the west. And because of the quickness of this attack, the village will truly be released from the grasp of the orcs. This time too. The one who shall prevail will be I declared. Very well, king. I shall follow you, replied Ji-za as he turned on his heel. As the king commands, simply complied Ji-go. And so, Ji-go and Ji-za left to prepare for the pursuit. From the newly evolved rare goblins, I left Water Manipulator, Ji-zo, along with Ji-gu to protect the village. I also left Ji-da who learned the Beast Warrior skill to keep up communication with the kobolds. It might be a bit abrupt for Ji-da, but I had his tamed dogs remember the smell of the kobolds, and then as I gave him some meat to bring, I immediately sent him off. This is the so-called line-up. As for the rest of the goblin rares such as the Wind User, Ji-du, the Wide, Open-eyed, Ji-dja, and the Spear User, Ji-da. I had them join the pursuit squads. The next day, with Mattis preservatives in stock, we began our pursuit. In our ranks were 1 noble class goblin, 4 goblin rares, and 30 normal goblins. I had them form 3-man cells, and then I had the higher class goblins lead 2 group each. In addition to these, there's also the Beast Warrior, Gi, and the stealthy Gig who had gone ahead with a group of normal goblins under them each, which totals to 6 normal goblins. Then back in the village, the number of goblins defending, without taking Giga and the injured ones into the calculation, is 38. Of course, I also removed the pregnant female goblin, the larvae, and the old goblins. I want to put an end to this battle as soon as possible. As we were about to set off, a rare class goblin neared us. Chief, he said. The goblin whose head was scraping the ground is none other than the goblin that had received the divine protection of the mad god that I had fought with yesterday. Please, king. Let me come with you in this expedition as well. It certainly might be better to have him somewhere I can observe rather than somewhere far away. All right. Go make your preparations. I immediately came up with a name to this subordinate of Giga's. I name you Gizu, I said. Thank you. I happily receive it. As he generously nodded, I made way for the west. Note. Gidji is actually just Gig with a long G sound with a different character. But just G is kind of confusing, so I'm calling the goblin DJI instead. Volume 1, Chapter 47. Timid Boy, you are listening at novelfull.audio. Race, Goblin, Level, 5, Class, Lord, Horde Chief, Possessed Skills, Divine Protection, Goddess of the Underworld, Altesia, Attributes, Darkness, Death, Subordinate Beasts, High Kobold, LV1, Gastra, LV1, Cynthia, LV1, Abnormal Status, as we exterminated the lizard doubles, the giant ants, and the pickle snaps that were in our way, we headed west. Have you grasped the trail of the orcs? I asked. The druid Giza nodded to my inquiry. Of course, he replied. Giza and the newly evolved druid, the Wind User, Gidu, were positioned within the center of the magic using goblins that were at the center of the army formation. Moving in front were the Wide Opened Eye, Gig, and the receiver of the divine protection of the sword god, Baruza, Gigo. The next highest class to me is the noble class Gigo, so I'm having the goblins from Gigu's faction that specialize in coordination follow him to support him. Substituting for Giga who couldn't move due to his injuries, is the spear specialist, Gida. Positioned in the back are he and the one who received the divine protection of the mad god, Zu-Oru, Gizu. The ones who I sent a day ahead are the beast warrior, Gigi, and the stealthy Gig. It's thanks to intermittent communication with them that we are able to follow the orcs' trails. King, a messenger from Lord Ggi has arrived, said Giza. What entered my vision was the figure of a dog big enough to tower over the goblins, running through the meadows. As I nodded to Giza's words, I ordered the army following from behind to stop. Enemy, seems, divided to 2 groups, reported Gigi's subordinate, who could also control beasts, after he spoke with the dog. So they're separated into 2 groups. Do you know how many there are? I asked. GIGI's goblin subordinate shook his head. The direction. The goblin pointed toward the west and the north. Seeing that, I gave out my orders. GI go, take 3 groups under you, and meet the enemy in the north, I commanded. Understood. GIG, you're coming with me, said GI go. Yes, quickly nodded GIG as he began to run with GI go and the others. If it's the noble class GI go, then he should have enough strength to contest the orcs by himself. Moreover, with GIG who specializes in coordinating with him, they should be able to manage even against 6 orcs. Of course, I've also taken into my calculations psychological pressure they are receiving from the ones being chased. GI de, take the lead. GI Zoo, go protect the back. We're moving out. I took a mouthful of jerky into my mouth, and bit it. With the tamed dog in lead, we chased after the orcs. It's been 2 days since we began pursuing the orcs. We quietly moved in the dead of the night. Eyes that work in the dark are really convenient. The darkness of the night is considered a natural enemy for humans, but since coming to this world, it's become an ally. The path the orcs traversed was not a complicated forested path, but rather, a relatively open area. It's true that this path is faster, but this also means that the pursuers' attacks will become relentless. If they can run quickly, then we can also chase quickly. Moreover, they're carrying wounded orcs with them. We confirmed it in the meadows this afternoon. There are patches of blood here and there, so they're definitely carrying their wounded with them. I don't know how far they've gotten by now, but I want to close the distance while we still have the upper hand. It would be pointless to attack when the ones tired are us after all. I looked around the surrounding area as I took a mouthful of my meat jerky. Then I followed the guide dog. Suddenly, at that moment, a pungent smell wafted to my nose, causing me to stop at my tracks. The dog ahead also stopped, and even began to groan. The smell of blood, muttered Giza. I quietly nodded in affirmation. My eyes swam around, searching for any hints of presence. The smell must have been brought by the wind blowing from ahead. Which would mean we caught up. Gida, take your subordinates, and see what's ahead. The spear specialist Gida, who I had left the position of the vanguard to, slowly nodded his head, then he moved ahead. Although he was paying careful attention to his surroundings, he moved surprisingly fast. King, it's the corpse of an orc. I neared the corpse while keeping my guard up. So this is the source of the smell. Looking at it carefully, I see there are scars all over the body. It's not hard to realize that this orc exhausted all of his strength here. So he exhausted himself here, huh? I muttered to myself. I ordered Gida and his men to deal with the corpse. They're close. Can we catch up to them in a day? Asked the druid chief, Giza, as he took a peep at the corpse. If possible, I wish to do just that. But, if they were running to just one direction, then it would be fine. But I have to also consider the possibility of them lying in wait to ambush us. I can't let my guard down. The fact that they left behind a corpse means that they're being driven into a corner. They didn't have the luxury to hide the corpse. Or is it a trap? A trap to weaken our noses. I thought of that possibility as well, but I shook my head. No, there's no one left to lead the orcs, right? If there was, then I wouldn't have been left alone while I was on the verge of death. There's nothing to fear. We'll continue like this, and pursue the orcs. Because they have been walking throughout the night, fatigue could now be seen amongst the goblins. But their efforts were appropriately rewarded. The stealthy GIG had finally caught up to the orc horde. Right now, we are rendezvousing with GIG, and will rest in the forest as we observe the orcs. The orc horde currently number 20. It's a lot bigger than what I had expected, but they are clearly exhausted. We continued to observe the orcs while being wary of the wind's direction. That orc has been controlling the orc since a while ago, said Gig as he pointed his fingers. On the other end of the direction he was pointing at was an orc that was a size smaller than the others. A child? I asked. After thinking for a while, Gig shook his head. No, it shouldn't be that young. But that orc's definitely responsible for keeping the horde together. The fastest way to win a fight between hordes is to finish off the head. As I narrowed my eyes, I took a peek at the orc horde again. There, I saw a bigger orc push away the smaller orc. They seem to be having some internal disputes, I commented. Yes. It's been like that for some time now, responded Gig. It must be dissatisfaction from being ordered around by someone with a physique clearly weaker than theirs. And right after suffering a defeat too. Tell me about the orc horde that split off from this one. Yes. While I listened to Gig's report, the orcs continued to fight. Apparently, the horde that split off from this horde separated after fighting with the smaller orc. The one leading this horde is that smaller orc. It seems to want to completely retreat. Chances are it probably wants to retreat back home as soon as possible. And since it actually brought the weakened orcs with it, it doesn't seem to be tainted by the law of the jungle. In other words, it's an intellectual. Or at the very least, it's smarter than the bigger orc that pointlessly pushed it. From my fight with Gol, I know that orcs can more or less talk. Up till now we haven't shared any conversations aside from with our overpowering howls, but if there are also intellectuals amongst them, then it should be possible to negotiate. If anything, it would mean that there's no need to completely exterminate the orcs. There's no reason to fuss over a few pebbles on my way to become the Goblin King after all. The restoration of the village is also halfway done. I don't want to needlessly expose the goblins to danger. You will lose her, you know. Altesia's words echoed within my mind. The human threat coming from the east. Rather than destroying the orcs, the danger lies in the east. I need to use everything I have in order to strengthen my weak pieces. As I was caught up within my thoughts, I saw the bigger orcs take 5 with it as they separated from the horde. What shall we do? Asked Gig. Attack, of course, I curtly replied. The corners of my mouth naturally rose up, forming a smile. If there is any question, that would be which to attack first. Master Bui, as the gazes of my wounded brethren fell on me, I raised my fallen gaze up. Master Goy and the others have, their voices were all shaken up. In order to soothe their panic, I clearly replied. I had them fight the goblins as a separate horde. It's clearly a lie, but even then, I mustn't show any weakness. I couldn't throw my wounded brethren away, and we spent so much time gathering our comrades. I don't think I made the wrong choice, but even then, I can't help but fear. It's almost as if the goblins chased after us right after we left. I ran away from the goblin village after the death of Master Gol with my wounded brethren in tow because I was scared. That Goblin King. Even though he had a small body like mine, the aura surrounding his body was completely different. It was scary. Using a flame-clad great sword, a mere goblin actually exchanged blows with Master Gol, and won. A heaven-earth revolving event or a bolt from the blues. I don't know. I don't know what I should call it, but anyway, it was a shock. Let's rest a bit, I said. Right. We should have also inflicted plenty of damage against the goblins. They shouldn't be able to chase after us right away. So it should be fine if we just rest here for a bit, and let everyone recover their strength. All right, responded the others. Seeing my brethren nod their head, I sat myself as well. My sword and spear are unusually heavy. It seemed like I could drop it at any time, so I left it on the ground. Master Gol who appointed young and little me is no longer here. Goy, and the others are all my seniors, so they refused to listen to my orders, and acted on their own. I know. I know that it's because I'm not strong enough. I don't have the power to make them give in, that's why they left. Even the orcs here too. The only reason they're following my orders is because Master Gol's influence is still lingering. I want power. At the very least, something like that of the Goblin Kings. Suddenly, I heard a voice scream from the forest. My nose moved, and the smell of blood wafted to my nose. It's the blood of my brethren. The distance is, no way. Why are there so many goblins nearby? And these many too. Everyone, stand up. Flustered, I quickly wielded my shield and sword. But as I was about to set a route, I was shocked. Why are there goblins in front of us? As I was thinking that, another scream bellowed out from behind. Goblin. They should have been a species weaker than us. But right now, what stood in front was a goblin with tawny skin, a black mane fluttering over its 3 horns, a vicious face, and a physique that was incomparable to us. It's him. The Goblin King who killed Master Gol. He's chased after us. Master Boy, someone called out to me. With my legs shaking, I walked toward the king of the goblins. His face was broadly grinning. It was vicious. Scary. 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 The subordinates behind the Goblin King threw something. Goy and the others who separated from the horde before had been dismembered and thrown at our feet. Goya. The howl of the goblins bellowed, sending chills up our backs, causing our feet to vigorously shake. Scary. 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 This is even scarier than when there was a giant spider. Orcs. The Goblin King's voice echoed. It's as if his great voice was shaking even the very piths of my stomach. Scary. I will give you a chance. As I stood there in front of my brethren, I heard voices scream out from behind me again. Swallowed by the fear, and from a quick look at the surrounding area, I knew. We were already completely surrounded by the goblins. Fall under my lead. If you refuse, then you shall all die here. We'll be eaten. Scary. 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 I couldn't talk straight. Give me time to talk with my brethren. For a moment, I thought I felt the goblin's golden pupils flash. No. If you are the chief, then you must decide. It's impossible. Unlike Master Gol, I don't have the power to convince my brethren. The only reason I was able to bring everyone here is because of Master Gol's influence. For someone like me to. That's, Master Boy, I turned my head to that shriek, and there, I saw my brethren all looking at me. That gaze of theirs that seemed to cling to me made me want to cry. I can't answer to your expectations. I'm small. I'm weak. I'm a crybaby. That's why. That's why this is the only choice I can make. Oh. From the Goblin King's subordinate, I heard a voice that seemed to both be shocked and admiring. We will surrender, Goblin King. I accept, Orc King. Wrong. I'm not the Orc King. That's a title only Master Gol has. Someone like me is. Someone like me could never become a king. But even as I thought that, I shook my head to the Goblin King's words. Orc King. Like this, we became subordinated to the goblins. Orc King Bui, LV 34, has been subordinated. Author's note. So they were able to take control of an orc tribe. I came to like Bui as I was writing the chapter. Volume 1, Chapter 48. The Messenger from the West. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Race, Goblin, Level, 5, Class, Lord, Horde Chief, Possessed Skills, Divine Protection, Goddess of the Underworld, Altesia, Attributes, Darkness, Death, Subordinate Beasts, High Kobold, LV1, Gastra, LV1, Cynthia, LV1, Orc King, LV36, abnormal status. When I got back to the village, I had the orcs immigrate. I gave them Gi Za's old place, the one situated by the root of the giant tree. The area surrounding it is a wasteland, so it's perfect for the orcs. After that, I made a simple agreement with that small frightened orc. I distributed different hunting grounds for the orcs and the goblins. I also gave instructions on how to deal with the humans should they enter the forest. This is how I separated the orcs from the goblin. There is a lake northwest of the great heaven-piercing tree. So I permitted the orcs to live off of the north and east banks of the lake there. This decision is something I made in order to create a breakwater for the humans entering. With this, there won't be any issues between the orcs and the goblins. Aside from me and the noble classes, the goblins don't have a way of resisting the orcs. But even if it weren't for that, I don't want unneeded conflict. That would only serve to benefit the threat from the east. Is it really alright with just this? Asked Bui. The small and frightened orc's words were unusually impressive. I've always thought of orcs as brutes who always tried to solve everything with power, but it would seem there are also orcs such as this one. As Bui nodded quietly, he let out a sigh of relief. Being the orc king seems to be hard, but I have no intention of taking care of him that much. At most, I just want him to stay clear of my way, and not be a threat to the humans. With this, the door to the west has finally opened before me. When I got back to the village, the cleaning was mostly done. What's left was repairing the fences, but that'll take some time. I asked Gi Gu, who I had left the village to in my absence, if anything happened while I was gone. A messenger came, said Gi Gu. What? I asked, surprised. A messenger from the tribes. I asked him to wait. The tribes. A messenger. Now where have I heard that before? From what tribe? I asked. Please ask him yourself, replied Gi Gu, not knowing either. While puzzled, I ended up having to meet with a messenger from some tribe. The messenger that was made to wait at the king's house was apparently a goblin rare. But although he was a goblin, he was clearly different from the goblins that lived in this village. If you were to ask what's different, well, for starters, he's wearing clothes. He's dressed simply, but he has a belt fastened around his waist, and is even wearing a pair of shoes. But that's not all that stood out. Beside him lay what was clearly a bow. Even though goblins are normally too clumsy with their hands, he's able to use a bow. The goblin sat quietly as he waited for me to take the seat of honor, then he spoke. Thank you for granting me an audience. I am a child of Gatsumi, Ra Gilmi of the Ganra tribe of the 4 tribes, declared the messenger. Fluent speech and a dignified manner. He gives off the impression that he's used to matters such as this. Let me hear why you've come, I said. I looked down on the goblin as I implored him to speak. Leader of the eastern village, please save Ganra, requested the Gimli. His skin is no different from the other rare classes, yet his intellect is clearly above the rare class. Is that because he's from one of the 4 tribes? Come to think of it, didn't he just call me the ruler of the East? How much truth is there in the words of this goblin from the West? I strained my eyes to find the answer to that. Of course, we will give you an appropriate reward. We are willing to give you a young elven lady as a reward. So an elf has finally made an appearance. If I recall correctly, they should be situated at the back regions, so it shouldn't be easy to catch one. But then considering the goblin's reproduction, it's probably necessary to capture a female from some other species. To have another settlement like the village we have here where the breeding is covered solely by the female goblins would undoubtedly require a powerful king. So what is it that you wish of me? I asked him. Please fight off one of the 4 tribes, Gaidga, he replied. You are fighting with your fellow tribes. Is the West that blessed compared to us here who are only able to barely acquire food for ourselves? But then again, there might also be threats of orcs, and perhaps even giant spiders deep in the forest. It's embarrassing, however, the truth is that a curse has been cast upon us 4 tribes. A curse. A curse since ancient times. A curse that dictates that the one we bow to will be the king who will lead the goblins. Ho! I would like to help you, but this village is currently under repair. Gilmy opened his eyes wide upon hearing my words. It was as if what I said was out of his expectations. The goblin cast his eyes down as he seemingly began to ponder. Give me 5 days, I said. Like a string that had been strung, Gilmy quickly looked back at me. As I nodded generously, Gilmy bowed his head deep enough to touch the ground. Change the name, asked Gi-za, puzzled. I lightly shook my head at the druid chief's, Gi-za's, questioning voice. To be more precise, I thought of giving another name, I said. Exactly what do you have in mind? Asked the old goblin. As I nodded, I answered the old goblin's inquiry. The village has grown bigger. Until now I've given simple names, but from here on we will be confronting the tribes. My vague words left the 2 puzzled as they both tilted their heads. Why do we need more names when confronting the tribe? At the old goblin's inquiry, I nodded and answered. What do you think when you hear, the child of Gatsumi, R.A. Gilmy? As expected of someone from the tribes, O.org. When Gi-za heard the old goblin's simple answer, his eyes opened wide. S-O, that's why. Gi-za's face twisted into a smile. That mischievous smile of his doesn't lose out to me. His smile is plenty dark. Legitimate blood, a blood that can support a person. It doesn't matter whether one is a human or a goblin, there's a natural sense of respect for one who possesses that kind of blood. Even I couldn't believe my ears when I heard Gilmy name himself. Thinking about it now, I was honestly surprised that time. But if that's the case, then we too must play that card. Whenever one speaks of the tribes, there is an implication of pride in the olden blood. A lineage to be respected. If I were to say it myself, I think the lineage itself carries with it actual power. So what are you planning to do exactly? Are you going to give the new name to rare classes up? No. I'll start handing it out from noble classes. First, I'll give Giga one. I'll call him. Please. Giga can't walk, so I let Gi-za directly face him. Giga came as he pierced his spear, then he sat like that on the ground. Then place his one hand on the ground, he looked up to me. Giga, I give you a new name, I declared. That's, Giga hesitated. Gi is the name of this village. Ga is the name I gave you. Thanks to your achievements in this recent battle, I give you the right to a household. Thus, I grant you a last name. A right to a house. If you wish, I could give you a village. My words left everyone in shock, causing them all to look on wide-eyed. It's the proof of the weight of my trust. And I won't give a last name just to anyone, only those with enough strength will be worthy of one. As I explained, Gi-ga's body shook. King, am I unneeded? Asked Gi-ga. Don't misunderstand. All I'm giving you is the right. If you so wish, then you can continue to stay beside me, I responded. But as proof of his honor and power, I will give him a last name. If at all possible, please let me serve under the king, petitioned Gi-ga. I understand. But for the sake of rewarding you for the power you've shown me, accept this name. By your will. From here on, you are Giga Rax. I gratefully accept. In the same way, I named the others Gi-gu Verbena and Gi-go Amatsuki. By the way, King. After I had dismissed the noble class goblins from the king's house, Gi-za asked me a question. What? If you were to give me a last name, what would you give me? At that moment, a flash of inspiration shot through my mind, and I answered him with a huge grin on my face. How about Gi-za-za? I jokingly replied. It's based on the same naming sense he suggested when we were thinking of a name for the Grey Wolves. When said that to Giza, his face was visibly shocked as he went quiet. Ha ha ha. It's a joke. I'll leave the pleasure of thinking of a name for when you actually evolve. Mina King. What? Even this is thanks to having a good teacher. I thoroughly enjoyed myself in this rare time of peace. Author note. An open path. A new name. The return of the king is at hand. Gossips. A pet sorrow, specimen name, Jesu, race, kobold, level, 1, class, high, chief of the pack, possessed skills, divine protection, none, attributes, none, subordinates, subordinated to Goblin Duke. The master hasn't been coming lately. There's no end to my loneliness. He's not here. Not here. Not here. Not here. Why are you not here, stupid master? The red guy brings me meat, but the master's nowhere to be seen. I want the master to bring me meat. I've been grooming myself every day just so I could show my fur to master. Every day, I wake up, wash my face at the lake, drink water, eat meat and groom myself. Ever since Chi and the others started being able to bark, master stopped coming. Does master prefer Chi? No, no. Something like that should be impossible. My fur, my body, the angle of my tail, no matter how you look at it, I'm better. Sigh. It's so boring. So let's eat for the meantime. I chased after the small, white, fluff, hopping before my eyes. Effort is needed to maintain a soft and glossy fur. I won't go to master myself. It's master's job to bring me food, and it's my right to let him touch my fur. That's why I won't go until master comes to bring food himself. But still. I have to say, this meat that this red guy's been bringing has gotten tasty lately. I want to eat again. I wonder if I'll be able to eat as much as I want if I went over to master's. I caught the white fluff with the claws I'm so proud of. Before I knew it, my legs had started walking toward master's place. But as I did, I played with the bones of the white fluff from before using my mouth. I wonder if he'd call me vulgar if he saw me like this. But I don't care. The one who's at fault is master. If master had properly brought orc meat, then I wouldn't be eating something like the bones of that white fluff. And still. It sure is fun chewing on the bones with my sharp fangs. The taste seeping out of the bones is so delicious. Before I knew it, I was humming. Ha, no good. No good. When I meet master, I need to make sure I properly show unsatisfied I am. That's why I need to bring the bone of this white thing, and throw, actually it's not like I need to bring the bone that close to matter, right? Then if I were to dig a hole, and put it there, master won't see it. Right. Let's bring the bone right underneath master. The green ones are the lowest in ranking. The rankings come after that. The blues one are a little amazing. But the most amazing of them all is the brown one who is my master. Of course, since I receive food from master, the next greatest one is me. There are also the two-legged thin ones, but I don't really get them. Those so-called humans sometimes enter the forest. I don't like them cause they like to bully us, but the humans over at master's place gives us plenty of meat, so I like them. As I thought those things to myself, I walked until I neared a place where I could smell master's scent. Woof. But what entered my ears was the voice of my natural enemy. The Grey Wolves are my natural enemies. That grey fur of theirs, and even though they were so small before, I can't believe they're now about half my size. Unfair. Master's definitely feeding them lots of meat. My ferocious howls have no effect on them either. Look, those two are actually slobbering with their tongues out, and wagging their tails vigorously, while staring at the white thing's bones in my mouth. I bet I'm not giving you any. The two grey wolves surrounded me from both of my flanks. Looks like they're about to charge. Kuuen, I'm not going to be tricked by that sweet voice of yours. But, at the same time, being attacked from both directions is dangerous. What should I do? Ah. What are you gonna do if you get your human-smell infested fur on me? What are you gonna do if I get the itch? Don't play with my clean tail using your forelegs. Don't thrust your nose at me. I know I smell good, but the only one allowed to touch this glossy fur is Master. Eei. Take the white thing's bone. I threw the bone, the two grave wolves ran, and I left them in the dust. I've gotten this far. It should only be a little longer till Master. I'm going to complain to Master about those two's bad behavior. Woof. When that sound entered my ears, I couldn't help but look back. The two grey wolves were running at full speed. Ah, Master. I'm not good at running. There's an area surrounded by fences where there's a lot of low-ranked goons. I passed underneath those guys through their feet as I looked for Master. 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 Where are you? I've come all this way, why won't you show yourself, Master? Woof. They're near. I can't shake off the wolves. I need to hurry up, and get on top of Master's lap now. Here. He's here. There's a two-legged thin one beside him, but I don't care. My special seat is free. Woof. Not good. They've almost caught up to me. Master. Ah, our eyes met. What's with that troubled gaze? Even I finally came out to meet you. If you're going to look at me like that, then I'm going to go. Woof. Woof. Never mind, please save me after all, Master. A magnificent jump to Master. Followed by a splendid landing over the Master's lap. Splendidly executed if I say so myself. Something on this level, surely the other two grey wolves wouldn't be able to copy it, right? Just as I was happily thinking that to myself, the two grey wolves came jumping at me. Yuwa, AAA, Wawawa. Master, do something. Good grief. What is it now? Grumbled the Master as he caught the two grey wolves in mid-air. Phew. Do you see? The Master is my ally. If you've learned your lesson, then you better give me the respect I deserve. Finally. I have arrived at my harbor. I rolled into a curl over my Master's lap. Phoo. This is my time of bliss. One that others can't change. If only Master would pet me while praising my fur, then I wouldn't be able to ask for anything more, but expecting something like that from this Master is a bit much. Sigh. I truly am generous. Reshia, I'm going to train, so I'll leave this to you. Wait a moment, Master. Didn't I just arrive at my harbor? As I was picked up, I was made to rest over the two-legged slender thing's lap. Take care of it, all right. Yes, gladly. What is this? What is this intimate atmosphere? Master, you see couldn't possibly be cheating. Even though you have someone like me, you actually dared to bother with a furless, tailless human. Son of a B*TCH. You know what I do to people like you. This. You seem to be in a bad mood today, huh, Heisu.san. You. Humans, just like when they found me before, they look at you with a gaze like that of stone. I hate you. You took Master away from me. Let me go. Let me go. Let go. My resistance, fruitless, she carried me in her arms. Now that's it come to this, I won't be able to resist anymore. I know. Let's quietly watch over your Master's battle, all right. We watched Master fight as she held me in her arms. Oh, how strong, Master. The lesser ones are being thrown one after another. With my mood better, I didn't hesitate to curl into a ball over my hated love rival's lap. Today was so tiring, too. I guess I should just go to sleep like this. It would be great if I could play with Master tomorrow. Author's note. A shocking revelation. The kobold, Jesu, was actually female. To think the protagonist was actually too dense to realize it. Volume 1, Chapter 49. To the west you are listening at novelfull.audio. Race, Goblin, Level, 5, Class, Lord, Horde Chief, Possessed Skills, Divine Protection, Goddess of the Underworld, Altesia, Attributes, Darkness, Death, Subordinate Beasts, High Kobold, LV1, Gastra, LV1, Cynthia, LV1, Orc King, LV36, Abnormal Status. Cynthia and Gastra played about with my tail that was like a toy for cats as I swung it. The two gray wolves, Cynthia and Gastra, have gotten bigger recently. They're about 50 centimeters long now. And although it's wrong, they're big enough to ride. Even their levels have risen too. They started at 1, and now they're 20. I can't let them act like babies forever. From time to time, when Jesu, the high kobold, would drop by, they'd end up grappling with each other. But as it wasn't anything serious, just friendly rough play, I'd just quietly watch over them. That I guess if anything, they must have been deciding the ranks. They are all similar dog-type races after all. I mean kobolds and wolves are all dogs after all, right? Anyway, it's been 3 days since the messenger came, and we've been repairing the village since. During that time, I ordered the orcs that are now living by the base of the great tree to the north to pick up the corpses here at the village. They were a great help. Half of the pitfall traps we made have also become functional again. Moreover, 10% of the fences have also been repaired. We also began a large-scale acquisition of food resources. As we did, I ascertained the course we would be taking. The plan is to leave the minimum number of goblins with the humans in the village, while we head west. Once there, I plan to turn Ganra's village into my base of operations as I attempt to have Gadga and the other tribes under my rule. Of course, I didn't mention that part to the messenger. Our last destination will be the acquisition of the Fortress of the Abyss, the home of the goblins. It is there where I will build my kingdom. Afterwards, I suppose I'll take with me the promising humans and the kobolds too. Once I put this plan into action, the village will be left unattended for a long time. At that time, the one to protect the humans will be. My gaze shifted toward the gray wolves that were playing with my tail. Cynthia was lying on her back, being playful as always, while Gastra seemed to have grown bored of playing, and was lying down, yawning. They're resembling the high kobold, Jesu, more and more. I won't say of what exactly, but I should be careful. Protect the hum. No. Protect Retia. Protect her well, all right. I rubbed Gastra's small head as I spoke those words. And he barked back, saying, woof. Good. Although I don't really know whether he understood or not. In any case, I'll have to leave some rare-class goblins behind to manage the village. The question is, who should I leave behind? I could leave a noble class, but then considering the humans, I should probably leave behind a druid. What a troubling question. King, did you call? Said Gi-za as he entered the house of the king. Yes, there's something I want to ask you regarding the tribes, I replied. With his hands folded and a robe over his body, he looked like a scholar. I wonder why he's even a goblin. What is different from us, normal goblins, to those of the 4 tribes? I continued. What's different, you say? Right, as he pondered the question, he sat before me with his eyes closed. Right, I think I've mentioned it before, but the 4 tribes are Gordab, Gadga, Parajua, and Ganra. Each one of these tribes carry with them the blood of the goblin ancestors. A story I've heard before. Regardless, it's an introduction to their fighting style, so I kept it in my mind as I continued to listen. As for their features, said Gi-za. Well, it's different for each tribe. That's precisely what I wanted to know. That is that these so-called tribes have turned themselves into factions of sort. With something like that, it wouldn't be strange if they managed to attain a peculiar evolution path. Gi-za continued. The strongest amongst the 4 tribes is Gadga, boasting superhuman strength, while the Parajua tribe manages the rider. Beasts. Rider.beasts. What are rider.beasts? If you've never seen one, it might be hard to explain, but they're basically 4-legged beasts. The Parajua goblins ride them like Lord Gi would one of his beasts. So they're riders, in other words. The Gordab tribe excels at raising and using magical beasts. Then as for the Ganra tribe, they're the most dexterous with their fingers amongst the tribes. Even amongst the tribes, they're the only ones who can craft and use bows. So the Gordab tribe are all beast tamers then. I'm actually not that well informed either. How about asking that messenger instead? That's difficult, but true. If needed, I should ask. In any case, it appears the 4 tribes have strength, mounts, bows, and beasts. I want them. A front line of powerful goblins. A mobile force of beast-riding goblins. Goblins that could fight from a distance. And goblins that possess special skills. If I could have all these, then building my kingdom won't remain just a dream. Finally the pieces needed to fight the humans have gathered. All that's left is to acquire them. I must acquire them. And riding. If even normal goblins like us could fight on mount, then I would like to acquire that skill. And this is hypothetical, but what if such a thing was possible, then wouldn't it be possible for a goblin who has lost his legs to fight once more? Giga racks the corners of my mouth twisted into a smile. Wait for me. Amongst the emotions that humans possess, empathy was the most unique compared to the other races. Who knows whether it's affinity or not, but ever since the attack of the orcs, Lily hadn't had to help the other humans too much. The need for that had greatly decreased. Big Sis, called out Byrne and Newman, who had a sword strapped around each of their waists. Lily couldn't help but pout in dissatisfaction when she heard their words. Didn't I tell you to stop calling me Big Sis? She snapped. Sorry. I slipped, said Byrne as he scratched his head. Newman could only laugh at his friend's blunder. With Lily having saved them, 15 villagers all in all, these people naturally came to rely on her. Before, Lily had to be the one to meet with the goblins even for the pettiest of things, but ever since the orc attack, the people have gotten less timid. Byrne and Newman are the only ones among the villagers who know how to wield a sword. But the extent of their knowledge is only from the bare experience gained when they were conscripted in the past. The difference between them and Lily, who is an adventurer that makes a living through her sword, is like night and day. Because of that, despite Byrne and Newman both being older than Lily by 5 years, they greatly respected Lily's swordsmanship. How's Pallone? And is Mill all right? He didn't get hurt from playing all the time, did he? Asked Lily. Pallone is Byrne's wife. She's currently pregnant. As for Mill, that's Byrne's oldest son. He's still a babe though. He's turning 5 this year. Although we are expecting soon. Unfortunately, even if it's the 2nd time already, there's not much a guy could do to help. As for Mill, well, he's the same as always. Always playing with the goblin masters. I told him it's dangerous, but he just won't listen, said Byrne, clearly perplexed. His friend Newman could only pat his shoulders. It'll work out, Newman said. I hope it does, said Byrne back. Seeing the two like that, Lily narrowed her eyes. Come to think of it, have you two gotten used to this village? She asked. It's been almost half a month since they came to this village. Well, we can't put our guard down, but it's not bad, said Byrne. They don't make us pay taxes like humans do. They also don't make us fight, added Newman. Apparently, the Goblin King didn't have any intention of levying taxes. Lily's expectation of a wretched life where they were treated as slaves was completely off. The king was generous. His only demand was that they produce what he wants. That's all. What the king wanted was food and the methods of preserving it. Whenever she talked with the Goblin King, Lily would mistake herself to be talking with royalty. An extraordinary one at that. The world outside the forest was in distress. Out there, chaos ran rampant with many of the chiefs in constant war with each other. And evil masters were like the grains of the sand, far too numerous to count. She knew how filthy humans were. It was precisely because of that she could not understand the goblins. Defeating monsters was common sense. Monsters are creatures with no other way of life but evil. Or at least that's what it should have been. Yet these past days have been telling her that common sense was nothing but a public stance. If so, then what should she do? She thought back to her respected employer. They have probably already sent out a group to retrieve Retia. Saint Retia Felzeal. The Ivory Tower's youngest graduate. A prodigy. Zenobia's young follower. A cardinal candidate for the church. A woman blessed with power and authority regardless of her will. She doesn't know whether Retia herself was aware, but Retia's influence was one such that it was enough to move a nation. Right now is still fine. But once that goblin makes man his enemy, where will Retia turn? And Lily herself as well, where would she go? She had to prepare herself. But just a little bit, she thought. She'd like to keep living in this miracle-like peace. Woof, barked Gastra as he swayed his tail. She carried him up. You've also gotten heavier, she said. Who knew those fierce grey wolves could actually be this adorable? As she thought that, she quietly prayed. I wish this days would continue forever. As Gastra rubbed his cheeks on her, she sighed. As the evening wind gently caressed my cheeks, the bell cricket's song could be heard both near and far. Even though I have no sense for seasons, I can tell, the seasons are changing. As I absent-mindedly stared at the moon, I felt a presence near me. Moon. Viewing? Asked Retia. I only raised my tail in response. If you're that lazy, you'll be hated by women, you know, she said. Unfortunately. I'm not fated to be with one, I wryly smiled. Well, whatever. Can I sit next to you? Do what you want. This village will soon belong to you all. Not yet, you mean? That's a bit wrong, right? Well, that's true. We absent-mindedly watched the moon together. How's Gi Ga? I've never treated goblins before, but his life should be fine. His life, huh? Are you regretting? She asked. Nah. I'm not. If I'm going to regret, then I wouldn't have thought to fight from the start. My resolve is just lacking is all. The pain in this chest of mine is because I can't come to terms with living on despite others sacrificing themselves for me. Something like that should have been obvious from the start. But I can't help but have my heart torn because of it. This way of living, it's as if I'm cursed, unable to live without hurting those close to me. But I have to endure. I have to endure, and move forward. Otherwise, there's no meaning to it. I wonder why you're so strong. Anyone would cry if they were sad. Anyone would run when in pain. No one would scorn you for doing so. No one has that right, said Retia. It's because I'm a monster, I said back. I won't forgive any weaknesses from myself. Strength. Strength alone, will I carve upon this world as proof of my life. Until then. I won't shed any tears. And neither will I run. Am I man? Or am I a monster? I have the memory and thoughts of man, but the body of an abnormal monster. I decided it then when I chose to live this life. I don't need the weakness of man. Even if someone were to stand before you, asked Retia. Yeah, that's right. With her eyes cast down like that. Reshia, what is she thinking? This wise girl who's praised as a saint, and bound by the chains of destiny, what do you think? Of your destiny. Your life. Your will. I never wanted to be a saint, she said. I want to run. I want to be just Reshia. As she stood up on her knees, she faced toward me, and rested her hand on my chest. The sound of shattering entered my ears. With this there's nothing left to bind you. You can even kill me if you want, she said. As her eyes looked up, her gaze met with mine. Ardor filled her eyes and her cheeks stained with red. The breath she breathed woke up a force within me that I want to kill and eat this woman, that I want to eat and violate and kill this woman. What are you hesitating for? Isn't she giving you her body? As that force twisted my thoughts, I looked back at her. Then you should fight. Against Zenobia. Against man. For that is the will of man. When I recalled the calm expression of the healing goddess upon seeing Reshia's face, I couldn't help but scowl. I said it, right, said Reshia. No one's that strong. People are weak. Her amethyst-like eyes, moistened and saddened, they shot at me. Please kill me, she said. If you don't, then one day. I will surely kill you. For that is my destiny, she muttered under that frightened, quivering voice of hers. I refuse, I replied. You are only running away. If you are human, then show me the will befitting that of man. King, she said. How strict. A sorrowful smile painted her lips. In turn, I could only caress her head. Tomorrow, I head west. When I return, I will return as the king of the goblins. Until then, please take care of Giga and the others. I brushed off the dust as I stood up. I felt Reshia gaze at my back when I stood up, but I left without saying a word. I will become king. For the sake of those who've sacrificed themselves. For the sake of those who will die from here on. Until then. I shall seek no one. Abnormal status, charm of the saint released. Author's note. The protagonist didn't want to abandon the wounded, so Reshia had to stay behind. Volume 1, Chapter 50. The Princess of Ganra. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Race, Goblin, Level, 5, Class, Lord, Horde Chief, Possessed Skills, Divine Protection, Goddess of the Underworld, Altesia, Attributes, Darkness, Death, Subordinate Beasts, High Kobold, LV1, Gastra, LV20, Cynthia, LV20, Orc King, LV36, on the day of departure, the one to guide as was the goblin messenger coming from the tribe's village, R.A. Gilmy. He appeared before us dressed like a human with a quiver over his back, and a small bow in his hands. He looked no different from a human hunter. Accompanying that hunter from Ganra were the beast tamer, Gigi, and the stealthy Gig. Their duty is to scout out any enemies ahead in cases of fighting until we reach the village. The difficulty of the coming battles will be decided by whether they would be able to scout the enemies ahead or not. In the main force are Gizu, the one who received the divine protection of the mad god, Zu-Oru, Giza, the chief of the druids, Gi-Go Amatsuki, who received the divine protection of the sword god, La Perosa, and Gi-Du, the wind magician. It's the main force's duty to exterminate the enemies spotted by the advanced force. Making up the rear guard were Gi-Gu Verbena, and as his subordinate, the wide-eyed Gig. These two goblins are tasked with the duty of securing a way back from the tribe's village to the Gi village. In the case someone tries to block a way, it's also their duty to ensure that they're dead. As for the goblins that were left behind in the village, there's the long-armed Giga Rax, the water magician Gizo, and the spearman, Gida. Originally, I didn't want to leave behind any of our already limited strength, but Giga's body was far too injured to handle a fight. In order to support him, I had to leave behind the water magician, Gizo, and the spearman, Gida. I also had to leave behind the beast tamer, Gida, in order to allow communication with the kobolds. I left 2 sets of normal goblins each. Then I took 40.8 with me. Our forces may have also been worn out from the Orc War, but there's also the food consumption to take into account when moving such a large force. Moving 50 goblins doesn't come cheap food-wise. It's because of that I decided to use preserved food. If we were to hunt as we moved, we wouldn't be able to make much progress in a day. But if we focused our time solely on moving, we should be able to arrive at our destination quickly. Giga, I'm counting on you. As Giga held himself up with a spear in place of a cane, he sent me off. The king too, may you be safe. With words of parting spoken, there was nothing left to say. I turned my back, and left the village. I would only end up saying unnecessary things if I had stayed longer after all. March! I ordered. With a voice that seemed to make even the forest shake. It's been 3 days since we passed through the orcs' turf. Since then the monsters we faced along the way have changed a great deal. As we approached the mountain range that separated the vast heavens and the boundless earth, the thick forest grew quiet, and a figure appeared from the grass-covered plains. The comforting wind blew past the meadows. In that swaying field of grass normally appeared several beasts. One of which looked to be a zebra wearing an armor stripe, a tiger with sword-sharp fangs, a saber tiger, or a rat that walked on 2 legs with a spear in its hands, a ratman. We subjugated those kind of monsters as we continued on our way. The first ones to find the enemies were always Giga's beasts. It's because the double head he was riding on, and the wild dogs amongst the beasts in his employ have better noses than the goblins. And as soon as a beast would be spotted, Gilmy's arrow would fly through the air. With nimble fingers unlike what common sense would suggest a goblin to have, he would pull on the string of his half-moon bow, letting loose an arrow with punctuality as if he had predicted the prey appearing. The arrow would fly, and it would strike at the beast. But a fiendish beast that could be called a magical beast even when rotten, could not possibly be felled with just Gilmy's arrow alone. From there, the beast would attack, enraged. But then the stealthy Giga would be right there hidden in the shadows with his presence concealed ready to strike the beast with his long sword. Most beasts would fall there, but there are some rare ones that are surprisingly lively. Cases such as those calls for the main force, the druids. So Giga, the wind magician, would cast his wind magic to impede the movement of the beast. Then with the beast unmoving, the normal goblins would be free to lay waste to the helpless beast. This fighting pattern is something we've been putting to practice in order to train the lower classes. A goblin will evolve from a normal to a rare. Then from a rare to a noble. The more I use the weaker goblins, the more experience they will pile up. I can tell how strong the 4 tribes are through the messenger of Ganra, Gilmy. Yet that Ganra tribe is currently being overwhelmed. The Gaidga tribe is a tribe of goblins possessing Herculean strength. If they are a foe more troubling than the orcs, then I will have to bolster my force's strength. As we passed the grassy plains after 3 days' time, we once again entered the thick forest. From here on is our territory. Not even orcs could enter past this point, said Gilmy with his chest puffed out as he continued to lead the way through the animal trail. As Gilmy walked ahead, the advance force stopped. Raising his finger, Gilmy asked for silence. The stealthy Giga readied himself. Giga ordered his beasts to go quiet, and I ordered the main force to spread themselves perpendicular. Something is coming. Rustling, a sound resounded out from deep into the animal trail. Gilmy braced himself, holding tight onto his bow. Then in the next instant, he swallowed his breath, and as a goblin came out of the animal trail, he struck out his bow. "Chieftain," he exclaimed. "Gilmy," exclaimed back the goblin. Following right after that goblin was another goblin, wielding a bow. Against which Giga struck his long sword out. They glowered at each other, the advance force and the unknown goblins. No, they're not unknown. R.A. Gilmy called that goblin, chieftain. Withdraw your sword, Gig, I commanded. Calm your beasts, Gigi. They're probably the Ganra tribe. Then the chieftain, who was taken aback, ordered. Put down your bows. They're not our enemies, said the goblin. Oh. A female rare, how unusual, muttered Giza, who was calmly watching by my side. At Giza's words, I looked at the goblin again with a tinge of curiosity in my eyes. It's certainly a type my village doesn't have. To think it was actually a female goblin. There's not much difference between a normal male goblin and a normal female goblin. I know I'm judging them from a human's perspective, but there's really not much difference aside from some breasts. But the goblin rare in front of me is different. She looks like a human. Red skin, a lone horn growing from her forehead, and flowing green hair that seemed to prove her a friend of the forest. She's taller by a size than the goblins, but she can definitely pass for a human. But even then, she's at most a young girl. Her face is certainly a bit rigid for a human, but it's not such that she couldn't pass for a human. With a loincloth wrapped over her chest and her waist, if anything, she gives off the image of a hunter. Is there something the matter? Did we not plan to wait for me by the village? Asked Gimli. Gilmy's question caused the chieftain's face to twist. It's because of Gadga's Horsons. They attacked us all at once. We managed to escape safely, but the village is hopeless, spat the chieftain, who was seemingly trying to do her best to endure the pain. Then she sent her gaze at me. This is, she asked. This is the leader of the GI village of the Eastern Goblins. I asked him to lead his forces here in order to aid in Ganra's crisis, replied Gimli, proudly. The chieftain of Ganra looked at me. Child of Jylan, R.A. Narsa. I am the chieftain of Ganra. Filled with dignity and pride, her appearance was like that of one who led her tribe. I'm sorry for having you come all this way, but I'll have to ask you to leave. There's no longer any village left to save. As she spat those words, she tried to pass through, but Go Amatsuki thrust out his curved sword. The curved sword that was sheathed at his waist just moments ago struck out like flowing water at Narsa's neck. What is the meaning of this, peasant? She asked, clearly annoyed. The goblins of Ganra glowered, and Go's eyes narrowed. Disrespect to the chief will not be forgiven, declared Go. Lord Amatsuki, please withhold yourself, asked Gilmy. But Go's curved blade did not even quiver at Gilmy's petition. However, Narsa didn't seem to be bothered by the blade. In fact, she seemed to be even provoking Go. A ballsy woman, huh? Speaking of which, Lord Gilmy. If we were to return like this, what would happen regarding the reward we agreed upon? Asked Giza as he smiled mischievously. Gilmy could not answer immediately. After all, he definitely wouldn't pay. If so, then that would prove to be troubling. After all, we have already mobilized our men, said Giza. Giza sent a quick glance at me. Those brown eyes of his over that smile of his seemed to be saying to leave it to him. But it's up to your discretion whether you need our help or not, but if we don't receive what we came here to receive, then we won't be paid. Do you understand what I'm saying, Lord Gilmy? I calmly watched over their exchange with my arms folded. Regardless of what happens, in the end, the 4 tribes will all bow before me. Since that's how it is, I might as well take this opportunity, and see how good Giza is at negotiating. Besides, he seems to be really fired up for this. That bastard, he's enjoying this, ain't he? What did you promise, Gilmy? Asked Narsa, nervously. The elf princess, replied Gilmy. Imbecile, spat Narsa. Gilmy began to argue with her. Gilmy began, but Narsa cut him. There's nothing here for you bastards to do. Leave, glowered Narsa as she spat those words against me. And I believe I said that would be troubling, said Giza. Princess, Gilmy tried to calm Narsa. Show respect, yelled Gi Go again. I wonder if she's forgotten that Gi Go's sword is at her throat. It doesn't seem like the Ganra Goblin's chieftain temper will get better any sooner. At this rate, this discussion will go nowhere. Anyway, Lord Gilmy. It's not as if we care that much about that princess of yours. How about Lord Narsa herself instead, suggested Gi Za. He seems to be used to playing the bad guy's part. Wait, didn't I see a similar scene somewhere before? That's unacceptable, promptly replied Gilmy. TCH. So goblins outside the tribes are really like beasts after all, said Narsa, but just then. Gi Za sent a gaze at Gi Go, and he pushed his blade a little deeper into Narsa's neck. The words she muttered then seemed to be powerless. Now, I'd like to enjoy this tense turn of events a bit more, but Gi's wild dog seemed to be growling now, so I made my move. Play time's over, Gi Za, I said. As Gi Za shrugged his shoulders, I passed by him, and wielded my iron second. Please wait, Chief of the East. Gilmy stood in front of Nara to block my way, but I haven't the time to bother with him now. Gi, how many? About 20, he immediately replied. Good. Unlike Gi Za who was playing around, he was keeping a constant watch on the surroundings. Gi Go, I'll leave the attack to you. I commanded. Understood. With the situation now like this, Gi Go had no choice but to put the Ganra goblins for later as he took out his second curved blade from his waist. Gi Do, support the front lines. Gi Za, attack the right. As you will. Leave it to me. My subordinates scattered themselves in the blink of an eye at my commands. As they took their normal goblin subordinates with them, they ran through the forest with their bodies compressed. Gi, Gi Zu, take care of the left. Yes. The three rare goblins left, and entered deep into the forest. Gi Gu, Gi, you two will be on standby. After I finished giving out orders, I looked back at Gilmy. Messenger of Ganra, Gilmy. Just as we've discussed, I will save your village. I declared. Why? Yes, he exclaimed after a moment of pause. But, there's a condition. From here on, the Ganra tribe shall fight under me. Narsa looked at Gilmy once. Don't mess with me, she snapped. But ignoring her anger, I looked only at Gilmy. Very well. I shall persuade the others, he replied. Gilmy, yelled Narsa, unbelieving. Then it's decided, I said. I confirmed my grip over the great steel sword that was over my shoulder. With this, one tribe has fallen. Now, which tribe will come next? Author's note. The long-requested female goblin rares finally made her appearance. Volume 1, Chapter 51. Unknown Forest. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Race, Goblin, Level, 5, Class, Lord, Horde Chief, Possessed Skills, Divine Protection, Goddess of the Underworld, Altesia, Attributes, Darkness, Death, Subordinate Beasts, High Kobold, LV1, Gastra, LV20, Cynthia, LV20, Orc King, LV36, the goblins blocking the path are bigger than the orcs. Muscles bulging all over their body, and black limbs wrapped only with a cloth. It's as if they aren't even thinking of defense. In the goblin's hand were clubs the size of a tree trunk. And their eyes were blazing red. Are-you-oh? That cry was a signal. As the goblins raised their club, they bashed it against the trees, sweeping the forest, and expanding their line of sight. Are-you-oh? That's probably the horde's boss. The goblins moved according to the bellowed cry, and there wasn't a hint of hesitation in their movements. Neither did they appear to be mere dolls controlled by strings. In that case, I suppose there's little meaning to hiding then. With a sweep of my iron second, great steel sword, I mowed down the trees. Hu Gosh Jia. Their words are difficult to understand. The future king of Ganra, I sarcastically replied. A great cry bellowed out in response. Are you? As one of the goblins within the Gaidga horde bellowed a cry, the other goblins cried out as well. As their war cries bellowed, Gi Go asked me. King, please grant me the honor of being the vanguard, he said as he brandished his curved sword. I nodded. They might be tougher than the orcs, I warned. I understand, he replied. Gi Go's small back that was 2 times smaller than mine signaled the start of the battle. I sent a quick glance to the flanks. And I saw the druid chief, Gi Za, hidden in the thickets by the right flank, and the goblins that had served as the advanced guard previously, the beast warrior Gi and the stealthy Gi, as well as Gi Zu of the mad god, by the left flank. The wind magician, Gi Du, was on standby, waiting, at the interim of Gi Go and Gi Za. For backup, there's the noble class, Gi Gu Verbena, and the wide Igig waiting behind me. Everyone was in position. And our enemy were the giant Gaidga goblins. Go! I commanded. With the speed of a loosened arrow, Gi Go Amatsuki ran through the ruined forest. Following him were his 3 subordinate goblins. On each of their hands were swords that showed the mark of use, proving the strictness of Gi Go's training. Are you? The incoming club was like a falling tree. But Gi Go slipped through that from underneath without any hesitation as he swung his curved blade. Gi Go swung his blade, leaving behind only a streak of light. In the next instant, blood gushed out of the Gaidga goblin's arm. But for some reason, Gi Go showed a displeased expression as he returned his curved sword back into its sheath. Looks like he wasn't able to cut up to the bones. Come! As he barked at the giant Gaidga goblin that towered over him, he wielded his curved sword in his 2 hands, and slashed. As the Gaidga goblin howled, its club descended. With his curved sword, Gi Go dodged the attack, leaving the club to fall onto the ground, hollowing a hole. At the same time, Gi Go slashed out a Nukadu with his whole body, cutting the enemy goblin in a stroke. That attack could not be called anything but a true slash. It was different from an inexperienced goblin merely striking out with its long sword. It was different from me who would only rely on the weight of the great sword. It was a true slash that made use of the blade of the sword and drew out its power. This is the blessing of one who has received the divine protection of the sword god. The Gaidga goblin that had been cut, could only fall helpless there where it was standing. A great pool of blood spurted out of its body as it fell, but Gi Go only gave it a glance. It must be due to his 2 skills and... I shifted my gaze from Gi Go's unthreatening battle to the other goblins. Clad me in the wind, excel. I moved my eyes to the right as I heard Gi Za's voice start the battle. Using excel, he rocketed past the Gaidga goblin. At the same time, he turned to his back. Like a strong wind. Like a whirlwind. Wind cutter. The 2 wind blades ran across the earth, and aimed for the opposing goblin's feet. A cry rose, and the enemy fell, and Gi Za's subordinate goblins bombarded the poor goblin with magic. The power behind their magic seemed to be weak, so they couldn't finish it in 1 hit, but with 3 of them bombarding the enemy goblin in turn, they were able to kill it. This side's doing fine too. From time to time, the wind magician, Gi Du would cast his magic and provide cover for Gi Go and Gi Za. It wasn't anything eye-catching, but it was necessary to shift the scales of war to our favor. And although it was plain, Gi Du was able to cover whatever they missed. As expected, there are no problems in either of these 2 areas. If so, then the left flanks is probably. Looking at the 3 rare goblins fighting at the left, they were currently at a stalemate. Gi Zu of the mad god couldn't display his power as he swung about his spear. It was really difficult for a mere rare class to cross swords with a Gaidga goblin. The goblins Gi Zu was leading were properly coordinating, but they're having a hard time. Their power is just too lacking. As for the beast tamer, Gigi, and the stealthy Gig, they were always bad at fighting strong goblins head-on. Gig's skill is used for fighting from the shadows after finding an opening. And then as for Gigi's beasts, they're just lacking too much in power. So they really have no choice but to rely on Gizu to break through, but they're starting to show signs of retreat. Gigu, I called out. Yes, he responded. Should I send Gigu out? Take your troops, and help the left flank. By your will. As he brandished his sword, he signaled Gig to join the battle at the left flank. Will this be enough? Ganra. Where are you? Just as I was thinking that, a goblin came out from in front the area Gigo was pressuring. Gigo glanced at me for a moment before choosing a different goblin to fight. How considerate. So he plans on giving me that prey, huh? The Ganra you want is in my hands, I said to the Ganra goblin who had jumped out as I blocked his way. Don't fuck with me, he snapped. The goblin swung its club. If it hits, my head would surely be crushed. But for someone like me who's experienced the Orc Kings, GOL, storm-like attacks, something like this isn't even enough to be considered a threat. Shifting my body to the side, I moved my body away from the trajectory of the club, and then I swung my great sword down at the goblin's legs. As I mowed down the legs of the Gadga goblin, the goblin fell, and another attack descended on it. With its arms crushed, it was no longer a threat. I took a good look around my surroundings, and I saw that the Gadga goblins in the area have already been dealt with. Well then, we've also managed to acquire some prisoners. What next, King? Giza smiled ferociously. The casualties? I asked. On our side, 3 are wounded, but they're just light wounds, he replied. Then it's decided. Pursue the enemy. Take Gilmy as well. We'll continue like this, and capture Ganra's village. We ran with Gilmy leading the way. The path that the Gadga goblins had passed had the surrounding trees mowed down, making it easier to go through. Before long we reached the village of Ganra. This. Should I say it's just as expected, or, this is our village, the forest of the twisted giant, unknown forest. When I looked up, even I couldn't help myself but be amazed. Up the giant trees were small houses built on its branches. There were fences built on the ground, serving as defensive points. There were also small cabins all over the twisted trees. But a good majority of those were already ruined. They were destroyed by the Gadga goblins. Look for survivors. But don't be reckless. I commanded. The twisted branches of the giant trees were undulated to the ground. You could also say they were twisted into it. Looking down below from up the trees might be different, but looking up from down here makes the whole place look like some naturally formed maze. The twisted branches were all intertwined in some complicated fashion. And the roots of the trees have split the surface of the earth, creating some sort of shape. The leaves are all big, and a single leaf was such that it was big enough to cover half a normal goblin's body. The intertwined branches were intertwined upon branches and branches, coiling themselves, and blocking the path. I had the 2 noble classes, Gigo Amatsuki and Gigu Verbena, take their goblins with them, and move through a different path. Accompanying Gigo was the stealthy Gig. Accompanying Gigu was the beast tamer, Gig. As I gave out those orders, I turned to Gilmy, our guide, and asked. Gilmy, why did Gadga attack Ganra? Why would goblins with such different lifestyles attack another goblin? They didn't come here to take over their village. With the Gadga goblins' giant bodies, even if they were to take over Ganra's village, they wouldn't be able to live within the village that's been built atop the branches. The Ganra goblins are generally small. I'm basing this from Gilmy and Narsa. I believe Gilmy is a goblin rare. And although Narsa has red skin, basing on her body, she should also be a goblin rare. It would be easier for me to confirm their class if I could use my on them, but unfortunately, my level hasn't surpassed theirs yet. That's, muttered Gilmy, hesitating. But as he was hesitating, a voice I wasn't expecting reached my ears. Let me explain, said Narsa. And here I thought she was just going to follow us. Level has risen. 5. 8.